Welcome and thank you all for joining us for our October Webinar Wednesday. My name is Sharon and I'm with SIPA, your Colorado Government Authority, helping you get more information and services online and offering Colorado government's grant funding. In today's webinar, Brady Hustad and Kat Homke of Argis Solutions will be diving into the fun topic of GIS. When you think about it, the majority of government work is location-based, so we're hoping this topic is really going to be topical and informative and useful for you. Before we get started, please go ahead and turn on captioning if you need or desire, and note that during this webinar you're muted. If you have any questions or would like to communicate with the presenters at any point during the webinar, please use the chat or the Q&A function. Those are open. We will unmute questions at the end if you want to ask a question. We'll also have some poll questions for you to answer during the presentation and a post-webinar survey, and we hope you'll provide your feedback. Please welcome me and joining our presenters, Kat, and hey, look, Brady, you're us, Kat. And
That's
now I will
interesting.
turn it over to them to get started. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. And apparently my name on the meeting is Kat Hemke. I'm not sure exactly how that happened. But I'm Brady Hustad. I'm the founder of Argis. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about GIS and kind of how GIS and GIS collaboration inside of state and local government. Just as a quick reasoning I talk about these things is we've been in business for about 10 years. We primarily specialize in doing GIS services for state and local government, as you'll hear from a few of our stories and stuff like this. And so we've been kind of helping get GIS working and improved and advanced inside of state and local government for quite a few years. And so we're going to be talking about driving smarter decisions today. And really, this is going to be focusing on how is it that GIS is built up into an area where it can make decisions and help you in this, visualize, you can have data that's valuable, data that becomes kind of system of record for you that's spatial. And you could go forward, Kat, if you want. So one of the things about GIS is that, especially in state and local government, I mean, we are, inside governments, we are locational, right? You are a government often because you're managing a park or assets underground that are utilities for getting water or stormwater or sewer or power to people, or you're doing assessments of property or making sure people know what they own, they don't own, the taxation's correct. A lot of what we do inside of state and local government is spatial, right? And that comes down to having GIS data, right? So, there are many different tools that kind of get you through this, but oftentimes it can be a challenging area for all of us because GIS is an incredibly broad technical subject, yet and because of that needs IT specialization. It needs locational, whether it's watershed or some type of expertise in a very specific technology, science or technology, and then beyond that also it needs to be presented in some way often to our constituents or our citizens. So you can move on forward. So one of the early things that happens, especially between governments, because if you're a really large government, oftentimes you'll have a GIS staff and you'll have a bunch of people that are doing this every day. And if you're a small government, oftentimes it's something that comes as a second or a third task that goes on what you have to get done, especially if you're in IT. Oh, by the way, you have to keep this Esri stuff going. And if you're, if it's a really small government, maybe, we've run into some people that are like, I have to drive the snowplow and also do state, the GIS stuff. And so kind of a question we have is, how many dedicated GIS staff members do you have? So we kind of pause here for a second, let you guys answer that. And the reason this matters is because it kind of matters how you can roll out GIS. Now, one of the great things about GIS is whether you have none or you have a bunch, you can make effective use of GIS in your organization. So
And there's our
okay.
results. Looks like 1 to 5 is the winner with 73%.
That makes a lot of sense to me. A nice smattering where there's either none, a one large one, and a little bit in between. And so what we're going to try to do is talk about how you have options of what you can do with a larger organization, kind of go down these and also things that can work if you have no GIS staff at all, right? Like, can you get GIS working when you don't have anybody nobody that does it day in and day out, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about both. The areas where it usually comes up the biggest areas where challenges, but also empowering comes from is the GIS data and platform and the GIS visualizations, dashboards, web apps, maps, things like this. The GIS data and platform, that is, can I get it turned on? Can I have data that's locational, that's spatial, that is usable by my organization? And can I make it available to people, right? Is there a way of me making this so people can actually get to it? On the other side is the visualization, that you take that data and the things that is now made it available and you visualize it that for people. And there's various visualizations you can do. And, we talked a little bit earlier, or I mentioned earlier about getting to your citizens. You could absolutely visualize your data to answer questions and to empower them to get answers back from your government immediately through GIS. But you can also make visualizations for internal use. You can empower your utility team, your public works team, your assessors, your parks and rec, your whatever department could possibly use your geospatial data. You can empower them through visualizations that allow them to do this. And so these are the areas that are both interests, but also sometimes the challenges. And so we could go forward with that. And so some of those challenges. And these are pretty common GIS. Oftentimes, you might have gotten your IT moving forward, but sometimes GIS can drag behind, right? My data is not in one central location. Maybe my data isn't even, it's siloed or put into one area where only some people can get to it. Or even in some cases, it's not even really enterprise or server based. It's still on files and shape files. You might have heard these names, file geodatabases, personal geodatabases that are sitting on people's machines, right? Where it's not really accessible by other people. Or the record's incomplete, right? You've started down this GIS path and it's either inaccurate or incomplete, so it doesn't feel like it's as valuable for you. And in some cases, it's still on paper, right? Much of the world of assessing, most cities are actually older than the average computer. And so they started with paper records of all their assessments, of their parcels, of their streets and how things are laid out. This is a reality for many governments, that they have records of things they're going through, right? On the flip side, visualization. There are problems, sometimes, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get this out to people. My servers that can do GIS visualization are not actually integrated into my DMZ or my demilitarized zone. So I can't actually get them outside of my network, right? Or I probably could do this. I mean, I am IT after all. I know how to set this stuff up, but I don't know if I can trust Esri's servers. I don't know how to make this secure. What do I have to do to make sure this is? Or maybe I've run into an area where I don't even know why I'm doing this. Who am I giving this to? Answering the why can be incredibly challenging and also incredibly important, because why would you do something if it doesn't actually have a purpose that makes valuable sense for your organization, right? And then finally, GIS is an important part of your organization, but there's a lot of other parts of your organization, and things like Microsoft or Google or Salesforce. They're huge things that you spend a lot of effort trying to keep updated and going and functional and maintained, so it's easily to maintain. Well, GIS becomes another platform, can be just as complex, just as big, and it's hard to keep it updated, hard to make sure all the versions are there, hard to know when to step up to the next layer and when not to. It becomes a whole new technology or whole new area of expertise you have to do. You can move forward. And so when you're jumping into this stuff, it starts becoming reality that you need to make spatial data that can be, as in a lot of organizations we work with, we talk about the system of record or the system of truth. Many times those are, standardized data. Where is the data that matters, that I have to keep 100% right, that this tells me how to run my organization, right? Well, as GIS gets in your organization, it becomes something that you need to be able to make a system of record or a system of truth as well inside your enterprise databases. And you need to be able to manage this and in the same way you manage all your other systems. And in government, it becomes very critical. In a lot of ways, as a classic, county story, people are not happy if your parcel and your assessments are incorrect. This is a very bad thing. How about in 911? If you have the wrong addresses, or if you can't get addresses entered that are effectively used and effectively functional inside of 911, this is a serious issue. So spatial data becomes a system that you must be able to trust and must in some ways make into enterprise, depending on areas that you're working in. You can move forward. And thank you, Kat, for running this for me. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a few areas. And by the way, I know I go really fast. I want to make sure we get this here. I want to make sure I get through the data before I bore you to death with the data. So we're going to keep on moving fast. But if you have, I know that they kind of mentioned how you have questions. I look forward to any questions that might come up from something I say. Happy to dive in at the end of this. I'm hoping to get done a little bit early so we have that time. We're going to go through about this kind of trend about how do we get through it. We're going to talk about the GIS platform. What does it look like? Kind of how does it roll out? What are the pieces and parts, things you have to think about, data management, some best practices, kind of thoughts that you might need to have about spatial data that's different than tabular or classic data, GIS visualization, where it goes on here, some common trends, things that people are fixing or having to deal with right now that are happening to them, and talk a little bit about the why for your where. Like, why do you do this? Why do you care about your location and stuff like this? And then a few ideas from clients. We do have Wheatridge is with us today. So about that time, Wheatridge is going to kind of talk about how they successfully rolled out and did and kind of worked both with us, but also on their own trying to get, functional GIS and what they did and kind of stepping through that. So thank you, Jesse, for being here. I appreciate that. And then we're going to, we have a few big ideas that we did with a couple different clients around the nation and a few final thoughts. So we're going to kind of keep on tearing through this. The platform. If you have it in GIS government or in GIS government, in state and local government, if you haven't heard the name Esri, you will soon. I believe it's up to 90 or 95% of governments use Esri as their GIS platform. And there's a good reason. It is a fantastic platform. It goes from enterprise, it can be on the cloud, it goes everything in between. It gives you tools to create, to maintain, to analyze the data. It gives you the whole breadth of it. And with that comes, of course, the same cost that you pay for other platform plays that you do, whether Google or Microsoft or Salesforce or whatever, Excel, whatever you're rolling out, is that it is complex, right? There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of technologies you need to understand. You need to know how to secure it. You have to set up servers. If you're in the cloud, what does it mean to publish? What does data look like? All of a sudden you have new data problems that you can hear words like symbology and topology, and you're like, wait, what? New things you have to do. And this all comes inside of this. But it's important to know that this is a great platform. And so because GIS spreads across the areas, Esri helps you layer this in. So in your IT standards, which way do you go? Do you guys have more of a cloud base or do you have an online or on-premise base? Well, Esri can help you go down these paths. You can do on-premise, you can do cloud with them. Do you have data standards? Is everything like offline shape files and DWG files, or do you have a database? Are you putting it into like SQL Server or Postgres or something like this? Esri can help you go through this, and that helps you understand your platform as you make these decisions. What decisions do I need to make in the platform? And of course, you want to bring it together the right way, and there's multiple things. I think I can safely say there's not a person on here that has unlimited people on their team and unlimited budget. If you do, I really want to talk to you because we can really build some amazing things together, I promise. But because we're almost all working under a limited budget, we also have to make the decision on budget. What fits inside in the area that I can afford that also meets the needs that I have for GIS? How do I roll this out? What can I do this? And then a great question on this and a great thing about this is if on some of the cloud solutions, you can get very, very small so you can still roll out something valuable. You can still answer questions and do spatial and start collecting that spatial data that's in the same standard as every other government, all the other people that you're working around, so you can partner with them, but can be on a very affordable, smaller base platform to fit the size of your organization. So you can move forward on that. So another poll question. What type of IT or /GIS setup do you have? On-premise, online, hybrid. And this is what I'm talking. And if you don't know, hybrid is where you're partially online or cloud and partially on-premise. So I'm going to.
Hey Brady, real quick, is there a pro? I'm sure there's pros and cons to one or any of the other, on-premise, hybrid, online.
There's
What
always
do
a
you see as
pro.
the trend? What do most people
Yeah.
do?
there's always a pro and there's always a con to any setup and situation. Obviously, to give a quick thing from a GIS perspective, online, the pro is you can really scale your costs and you can really ease your IT burden. So online, like we've rolled this out for people. Denver Botanic Gardens is a perfect example of this. They have a really robust IT organization, but they just don't know GIS and they don't want to learn it. They've got their hands full. So they went onto a cloud because it empowers them to allow like the Esri cloud to kind of do a lot of the IT maintenance for them and takes that burden off of them. Another reason to go cloud is you could have actually this isn't surprising at all, but you could have smaller footprint, a more budgetable footprint, right? Where you do a little bit less with but still get the full aspects of everything from visualization to data storage to the servers and the analysis in between. On-prem gives you all the control to put inside. You can control it. You can put it in the structure. You have a lot more control. You get a little bit more freedom. You can have more easily a larger user base because you go in cloud, you're buying users and stuff like this, so it can add up. And you're like, oh, I only have 2 users. All of a sudden, I have 20 users. Oh wow, my price went up by 10 grand, or 10% or 10x, right? Things like this, where on premise you have a little bit more stability and you can get into these EA or enterprise agreements with Esri and other organizations, which stabilize and allow you to budget a little bit more consistently. So there's value in both. If you're doing a robust rollout on premise, has a kind of high startup cost, but it doesn't increase radically after that. Like if you break that barrier, then it becomes a pretty valuable place to be for a while, where cloud can be much, much, much smaller, but could scale to be more expensive than on-premise, depending on the size and scope of what you're doing. I think it'd be a way to say it. Did that answer your question?
It does. And it looks
Yeah,
like most people are using that hybrid version at
yeah,
63%. So
yeah.
cool.
That's a really good way because it gives you kind of the ability to pick and choose what works best for your organization and what works best for the technology you're rolling out. And so on data management tools, kind of going down this, when we look at all of these parts of what Esri gives you, they give you the gamut to manage your data, from building up what they call a data store, where you're literally putting your data into like a Postgres or a SQL or an Oracle database, to being able to publish that in a way through REST services and stuff like this so that other people can use it, to doing a visualization or an analysis on that so that you can use the data to make decisions off of it. The whole gamut of this is there. But in this, you always have to go back to the beginning. The data. What do I have? What am I tracking? Where is it? So early questions you need to identify. Identify what data you have. What do you do? Counties tend to have parcels and some roads and maybe sometimes some public works, ditches and things like this that they'll manage. Cities often have like a utility, maybe a water, storm water, sanitary sewer systems, sometimes a fiber ring. Um, you know, but public works, signage, all of these things are spatially referenced data that have to be tracked. And so you identify what data you have and what you and all of that. Then where is it stored? Is it just sitting on a GIS analyst desk, or is it in a server? Do you have it on? Is it already in a SQL database? Is it already here? And who owns it? How do you make sure you manage this correctly? Is the owner the person that has to build the GIS team, or does IT build the GIS team to manage what the owner has? How does that work inside everything? And how does that make sure that who has the authority and the accountability to make sure that data matters and is correct, right? And do you have access? Or even a more critical question, do the people who need access have access? In other words, if it's sitting on a GIS analyst desk, do you have to play mother may I with this person to make sure you can like, hey, can I see that data? Or could you do an analysis for me? Maybe not always the best scalable solution. So can we move it off of that? Maybe is there a place in between? But then maybe there's some data that's like a specialized watershed for 2 parks in your neighborhood, in one of your neighborhoods that you're really analyzing that really doesn't need to be anywhere. I mean, just that you just need the answer that the analyst is getting you, right? Well, maybe that's fine. They just leave it on their machine and don't worry about making that something that's public, right? And then a really important question is what's missing, right? Like, okay, so I have these records, but I don't actually have all the roads that are outside this boundary. Well, that's probably something that I have to think about because at some point, especially with new standards of NG 911, that may be becoming important. And so getting through that, getting those questions answered, making sure that's important. Some things to think about when you're implementing your data on best practices. There are tools inside of Esri that help you look through your data. So ArcGIS Data Reviewer allows you to kind of look at it. It basically reviews your data and says, is it in good form? Is it not? It checks things like topology. Topology is, does my data connect right in a spatial manner? Symbology is, does it show the right symbol so when somebody looks at it, it makes sense to them, right? Um, Data Reviewer helps you make sure you get that set up. Attribute rules for data validation. If you think about this, this is kind of like maybe stored procedures or triggers that you might be used to if you're more of a classical data person, that when you enter data, it does something. It either calculates the data to make it better, or it validates the data saying, hey, you can't enter this. A real common one for governments is, especially in addressing, in 911, there's a reason, there's a sounds like tool that you want to use. Because, for instance, right. You can't have 4 roads that are named right. R-I-T-H, R-I-T-E, W-R-I-G-H-T, W-R-I-T-E, and R-I-G-H-T, because somebody's yelling on the phone in 911 going, I'm on Right Street, I'm on Right Street. And they're like, which Right Street, right? So there's tools to help you make sure you don't do that. Right's obviously an easy example, but even a long name can sound a lot like another long name. And so you want to make sure you check that so it can sound different for when a 911 operator is answering the phone so they know where to send people. TSE, traceable, verifiable, complete. This actually comes around the energy world. We work a lot in energy as well. And what they're doing, this is for pipelines, but it's something good to think about. Is my data traceable? That's when the data reviewer with topology. Is it verifiable? Can I see that it's correct? And is it complete? Do I have all the data I need? Do I finally have all the boundaries that what I have to manage is here and there? This helps build a checklist of things that you know that you need to do to your data. And the final thing is this is a big question, and there isn't a right answer yet. But in the world, when you have multiple people changing data, you can have conflicts, and you want to protect against those conflicts. And so there's versioning models that say, hey, if Bill and Sue are both changing things, who gets precedence? How do we pick which one? All this type of stuff. They have versioning models inside of GIS data, especially Esri data. One's traditional, one's branch. Traditional is more of a classic, like direct connection to a database, and branch is more of an internet-based or a REST-based way. Both have very good value. Both are still actively being used and being chosen to go with it. Branch is, of course, the newer version. That's why it's not called traditional, but it's an important decision to make of which one you choose, because it doesn't, just because branch is new doesn't necessarily it's the right solution for you. So kind of making the right decision between those. And when you go into data, there's new questions to ask when you're going through this with spatial data. Now we're going to actually look at the spatial aspects of this topology that I've been talking about. You see the 2 pictures, left and right. If you enter spatial data and it has gaps and stuff like this is not great for a partial system or a lot of systems. You need to do things that kind of create that, where on the right, where there's an actual single barrier between 2 adjacent parcels, or do my roads link up? Or if I have a water outage, can I actually trace up the water system to find out what possible people have been affected by it? Where could it go, or an electrical outage or things like this, and how that affects. This comes from these things about making sure that my data is connected and is topologically correct. Additionally, there's things like domains and subtypes. These are what you'd be used to as like a drop-down list. Like in Esri, in the Esri world or in the GIS world, this is what would be a drop-down list, right? Where you have 10 selections and you want to make sure you only have those. And then, of course, we have tools, just like many other things inside of GIS, which you want to think about as workflows. So there is a certain way you have to go through this. I have to draw the data first, then I have to name the data, then I have to check the names of the data, then I have to do this. Well, there are tools that help you do this inside of Esri, so you don't skip steps, so you make sure you have good, robust data when you get through it. And so you can build workflows for your data editing. Publishing. So when you're building all this data, you have to do something to it to make it available, put it onto the server and make it available to people. And in the Esri/GIS realm, we call that publishing. Many of the questions you might have about this in data is similar to the questions you'd have in other parts of data, in your other classic data things. Is it indexed? Can I do searches and queries more effectively and more efficiently? Do I back it up? Even the cloud is important to back up, as I'm sure any IT people here on the call will say. They understand that you have to have ways to make sure that your data is robust and being protected, right? What's public? What's private? There is, especially post 911, there is 9/11, sorry, 911 is in my brain. There is data that is not supposed to be public. Most water systems are not supposed to be public anymore. They need to be private. Still needs to be shared inside your organization, but private. Some things need to be public. Hey, this is how we're laying out, assessment. This is open data acts. Governments also have that data that is supposed to be, and by law is required to be public. So making sure you separate these and know how to go it. A best practice hint on this, especially if you're doing the hybrid approach, is many of my clients do their private data on their enterprise server for Esri, and they do their public data in AGOL or ArcGIS.com, their cloud server. And so the cloud easily goes out there. You let Esri manage the spikes and up and down of usage of public data. And then things like your water teams and your field operators that are using this data can use the private servers because you could keep that within your VPN and stuff like this, just as something that a lot of people are doing as a best practice. And then, of course, how do I make sure I do this? Because data, geospatial data gets big and big fast if you're sharing it over the internet. How do I make sure I do my symbology and zoom scale so I'm not overwhelming my servers and stuff like this? And finally, where do I host it? Do I let Esri handle the whole thing for me? Do I have a SQL Server database or an Oracle database or something that I want to put it in? All these types of things. You can move on. And then we get to the visualization, the other half of this. Now, the fun one on this, you can look, this is actually for real visualizations from various clients. The bottom one is a encroachment for like parks and right-of-ways when people might build onto your land and you have to go through the polite way of either, hey, please get off my land. Oh, please. Okay, now here's a fine. Okay, we're gonna literally cut your building down. All the steps that you have to do as a government when people abuse their rights. The one on the top right is actually from Canyon City for the Phelps Quarry. They wanted something that was like being output in their areas onto their kiosks and stuff like this that allowed people to kind of see the dinosaur bones that were found there and all the fossils and artifacts. And so both of these are kind of an interesting way of visualizing. The one on the bottom is actually completely internal, where people are walking through and they have it on their mobile devices and they're looking at it. The top one on kiosks and stuff is fully made for the public. And so there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Maps, dashboards, web apps, ways to share these things. You can move on to the next slide. And why this is so important is in a lot of ways, you can have the super cleanest data in the world, but if it isn't shared to the people that need to make decisions or need to see it so they know what's going on to be informed, it does nothing. And so the visualization amplifies what your organization is trying to say. And it can also make your organization more efficient because maybe, like for instance, a system that we built for Broomfield was they have a lot of construction projects going around in their area and organization, right? And people are always asking, well, what's going on in this? Especially commissioners were asking, well, what's the status of this? And I need to share this with people. I need to be in a memo. I need to put this here. And so we made it so it was kind of self-serve. So they could go in and say, hey, for this project, give me a map that says these things so that it can be out in a PNG and I can put it into my memo and I can share it to people. And it automatically did that instead of tying up your IT/GIS staff to be making those maps for them. You can use these visualizations to empower your organization. Or another one where we built a cemetery solution where it empowered the cemetery team to use the GIS and the management of the cemetery without having to be on the GIS team. The tool was in their hands and allowed them to do that, a very internal tool in that case. And so questions you have about visualization. Who am I trying to support? Because that matters whether it's public, private, a mixture between. How do I pick what tools I do? There are tools you can do full custom, you can do half custom, you can do out of the box. How can you manage these tools? All of these make a decision because maybe you have nobody that knows Node.js. Maybe you have a bunch of people that do. Don't pick a tool that you can't maintain, right? There's probably a tool you can maintain that can still give you a pretty good answer. And then, of course, securely. Where do I put this? Can I put it on the right server? Is it already inside of that? And various areas like that. So you can move on. And that, of course, goes to the why. So these visualizations you can have, you have this data. Now, to make these things valuable, to make sure that budget is being appropriately spent, and you can justify budget that you are asking for, is why. Why do you do this? I am doing data. I'm building this addressing tool because I need to upgrade my addressing to match NG 911 standards, the new NINA standards. I need to do this. That's a really valid and obvious way. I am building this so I can answer questions because currently the public have to call our office to find out about their parcel lot, parcel, taxation, all of this stuff, which is supposed to be in open data. I am building this so I can allow the public to know about their land, and this is why. We've had an opiate crisis. I want to be able to give the people knowledge about how we're attacking this and what it looks like and what the impacts are on our city so we can move forward and through this. Why am I building this? Because then it gives you the data. Common needs that get you to say these things. This is a big one right now. Esri is an old tool like everything else in this world right now. They've been around for a while. So some of their software is getting long in the tooth, and there's a lot of modernization. ArcMap, if you've heard about this, is their primary tool. It has been discontinued, and now it's Arc Pro. So a lot of governments have about gone through a process of getting rid of that. Web App Builder, which was their mine visualization tool for a long time, has ended because it was based on a Dojo and a limited SDK. Now is going on to a React-based, which are both GIS platforms for doing, web platforms for doing advanced websites, into Experience Builder. But because these are different platforms, it has to be transferred. This is a big modernization step. You need to silo data. This is a really, really common one. These people have the data. They've always had the data. They still have the data. They've never built systems to share the data. Other people could use that data to be more efficient. How do I move out past that? And then inaccessible websites. There's a big deal in Colorado, right? Well, and I know there's some really great teams that are doing some really awesome accessibility, but maps are different in accessibility than the average tabular website. There's different rules you have to follow. How do you explain a map to somebody that's visually impaired? It's a different answer to a question that you have to think about differently. And of course, complex GIS tools. You're not going to just hand everybody Arc Pro with its 1,000 tools and say, hey, this is great, just use this. You'll find all your GIS answers here. But you have to think about how you make it usable for the audience that you're at. And that can often block how you get there. So you have to think about how they go through that. You can move on.
Brady,
And
before
here's our
we
next one.
jump into the next one, there is a question about, are you seeing local governments using drones much?
Actually, yeah. Drones are becoming an effective way to collect data, and they use it in a myriad of different ways, right? So, like to building inspection or asset inspection, like if you're running a power grid or something like that, um, having a drone fly around it and do an inspection. In fact, drones have been in some ways in GIS longer than in other places. Like for instance, if you run a sewer system, something you probably know if that's part of your world is that they had little basically RC cars, also known as, terrestrial drones that would drive through that points, drive through the sewer to see if there's been, if any trees have grown through and inspecting that so you know the condition of your sewer system. Because that can be a very difficult thing to inspect, right? They're definitely being used. You do have to be careful. There are some pretty good tools built inside of Esri to take data that's collected by drones and turn it into spatial data. I believe drone to map is a pretty common one. And it's incredibly helpful because it can really give you kind of a larger expanse than having to put your boots on every single thing you want to collect. That was a good question.
All right, so we have an answer in the chat for what is your greatest GIS pain point. CDOT, reverse geocoding to pinpoint addresses of car crashes in rural areas.
Yeah, that is a good one. And and that's actually, this is something that's and just CDOT, you're not alone in this pain. We're doing multiple projects. Actually, one of the projects we're going to bring about is the upgrade and improvement of addressing, and specifically rural addressing, so that you have better addressing, more complete addressing, and NINA compliant addressing in rural, so that when that happens, you're actually getting there. Yeah, all you have to do, I don't know if you go by Nick or Nicholas, so I'll also say Nicholas, that's safe. Nicholas, is you have to convince all the counties around you to actually work with us to get your addressing updated so that we do have good addressing. Because it is a difficult problem. I mean, where is the driveway? Where is this? How does this go together? Two driveways are 3 miles apart. Where in the heck am I? And so we are doing upgrades. And in fact, one of the stories we'll show you is an upgrade of addressing for a rural area. It happens to be in kind of the Arkansas-Texas border. But with the same principle goes through Colorado and stuff. And we've done half a dozen of these projects now. So
And one other answer
yeah.
that came up in the poll was accurate data.
Yep. And I'm going to bring up just a slight point on that quick, and that's an incredibly important thing because it is difficult. And what I do is I say, you know, slow and steady wins the race. Consistently work with your data consistently. Keep improving it. Take the small improvements. Don't disvalue the data just because it isn't perfectly accurate. Find good values of it, because if the data is valuable, it's easier to invest in it, and keep getting the data better because people are using it, which puts pressure on it to be better. So find good uses. Even if your data is not perfect, find good uses for it, because then it's easier to budget and it's easier to keep moving forward, but keep that pressure on there. But yeah, it is a pain point because to be honest, I mean, even the just, if your data is 20 years old, it's wrong because the tectonic plates of the world have moved. I mean, it's just hard to keep data perfectly accurate in the spatial realm. So
And then pain point is the cost of enterprise for small organizations and getting the
yes,
funds to get a regional GIS up and going.
it is. And because it is expensive, all IT is expensive, but I have rolled out effective GIS for organizations. If you know where Rico, Colorado is, it's about 30 people. We've been able to roll out effective GIS for them on their budget. Okay. You can do this on a small budget. I mean, down to just in the $25,000 to $5,000 range, and have an effective GIS. And I'm saying dollar amounts simply to tell you that it really can get into lower areas. If you box in your need, if you're focused in your value that you need to address, we can help you get there. And it is possible. So I want you to say, be encouraged, okay? Because it can be done. Because yes, I know if you got price, somebody came by and gave you a price of ArcGIS Enterprise, you're like, what the what? And how much does that cost me every year? I only have 100 people in my town. I only have 1,000 people in my town, or 5,000 people, or whatever it is, right? That's not part of my budget. I don't have budget for that. Well, there are ways that we can make that fit right and make it work for you. Okay.
All right. Thank you all for the feedback. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
that was awesome. Great questions. I hope that helped a little bit. And another thing we can do to help you get kind of started and figure out where that is or what you should do is we do GIS assessments for a lot of people. You kind of go in, we're independent. We can kind of right size this. If you're a huge organization, it can take a while, big document. Smaller organization, we can kind of keep it really, you know, appropriately sized, where, what should I do? Where am I starting? What's the gap? And to answer the questions I need to answer, what do I need to do to get there? Right. And we understand that sometimes maybe it's only one or two questions we can even get to, like, the whys. You may only be able to say, listen, I have budget for one why. And so we can help you decide and work back and forth to find out the number one priority why, and give you a path to get there. And with that, give you another part of why can we get down to these lower prices? Well, some of it's this COTS versus custom. A decade ago, almost every GIS system I built, I had to build in a custom manner, right? I'm writing a whole bunch of code. Nowadays, there's COTS tools or commercial off-the-shelf tools. And what these do is it allows you to configure, instead of spending, a couple months of somebody like me's time that likes to write code, and put together something that can do, maybe it's not 100% solution, right? But it's a 60% solution or 80% solution that does most of what you do. And the best part is it's maintained by Esri or somebody else. When they upgrade their tools, it gets upgraded with it. You can maintain it. You don't have to have somebody like me doing it every day. And so it's great to make this decision. However, that doesn't end the days of customized, because sometimes you do need a customized solution. Sometimes your addressing is very, very specific and you have to do it this way. That's why we want you to, this is an important thing to be thinking about these common metrics of, hey, we're driving towards COTS as much as we can, but know when you need to be custom and make sure you're budgeting and looking at that appropriately, because sometimes you're going to get the COTS tool. We did this recently with a government, and it was a bit frustrating because they said they want to go COTS and they get in there and like, it just doesn't quite answer my question, right? It's just not quite good enough. Right. And so I'm thinking they're like, oh no, I'm going to have to go back to the well. I'm going to have to get into this commercial or this custom solution. So do think about it, because both have value. but it's a super empowering that if you can do the 60 to 80% solution, COTS can start solving a lot of problems for you in a much, much, much more affordable way. You can move on.
Hey Brady,
Yeah.
so if they start with COTS and then find that they need to customize, can they start customizing on top of that?
If you make the right decision up front. Because
Okay.
and I'll use Experience Builder as an example, or Web App Builder historically. Experience Builder, and this is going to be a little bit technical geeky for 2 seconds, but Experience Builder is a node platform engine that runs a React website on top of that brings in the Esri data and has a bunch of widgets that you can just drag and drop and put in there. So you can go in and build a pretty cool website, just drag and drop and click. But I bring up the technologies because that's music to somebody like my ears, which means if I'm a React developer, if I know the basics of Node.js, I can go in and customize that and build either a custom widget or actually customize that actual website for you to kind of do a hybrid approach in between. There are multiple tools like this that we can do this within. So you can do kind of a half and half solution. Also, sometimes if you're just willing to think a little bit outside the box on your workflow, and say, I'm going to actually break this workflow into 2 pieces. I take this custom part, put it over here and make a micro app to solve that. In other words, the smallest custom I can do. And then I streamline this through like a workflow process, like tasks or something like this, where this is all just out of the box. And then this one custom thing, I kind of break loose and make it 2 workflows, and it allows you to do that. So there's different ways to think about it. And we like to be creative that way because the reality is we want you to be most effective in your GIS. And if you do that by getting the budget to the right place. And Chris, you're correct, is that COTS can often hit that roadblock where you just run into it and it's like, it just doesn't quite do what we want it to do, right? So that's why I say we can balance the custom and the COTS. That was a great question, Sharon. Oh, where am I? Oh, another common path that's happening right now. These are actually good websites, by the way. We're showing these to you because you can go see these. The one on the right is from the state of Colorado that they're inside their OIT group. Their GIS team has put together guidelines, spatial data guidelines for accessibility. And it can be super helpful because you'll notice that it is absolutely different than classic accessibility. But this is a big trend right now. The law is passed. We're all having to figure out how to deal with this new accessibility rules. And the right answer isn't always just turning off your website because then you don't have to worry about accessibility, right? Sometimes you still have to use the website up. And in this case, these are ways to look at it. And so we've been working accessibility from a spatial perspective. I know there's some really cool organizations that are really specializing this from a more tabular perspective, but this is a big trend, just like COTS versus custom and stuff like this. There's a big trend that's happening right now with these, and hopefully these tools can help a little bit. Yeah. Oh, thank you for putting the link in there, Sharon. You can move on. I don't know. Oh, and that was the last of the trends I had. I thought there was one more. That's my apologies for me. And we are going to kind of open the floor for Jesse to kind of talk a little bit about how Wheat Ridge has been handling their GIS. So Jesse.
Brady, it is always so good to see you. It brings my blood pressure down. But not just me. We also have Julia Talent. She is our GIS architect. SIPA and Argis have kind of been chocolate and peanut butter for us. I first came in about 3 years ago to the city of Wheat Ridge, and we had gotten a SIPA micro grant to develop what we call the Projects and Properties Map, which is basically a way for residents to see what is going around, construction projects are going on in the area. And then when we had the cyber incident in August of 2022, we needed help rebuilding just about everything. So we wound up getting linked up with Brady and Argis, and it was a complete rebuild. They helped us redesign and rethink everything GIS in our environment. We went from having one production server that we couldn't even access because it was encrypted, and rebuilt everything with modern best practices and from a security first mindset. So now we've got an environment with production and test environments so that we can actually try out the things that are working before we push them to production. We've got cybersecurity, enhanced security. We have endpoint protection. We have certificates on everything now. And oh geez, Brady, we had some really, really late nights. We also
Good
took
nights.
we also took the opportunity to move from ArcMap to ArcPro, which was a really big shift, not just for us, but also us in IT and the GIS team, but also for our users. But we decided pretty early on that it didn't make a lot of sense to rebuild the exact same thing that had been compromised before. So we rebuilt bigger and better and stronger, and Argis was a huge piece of that. And I'll hand off to Jules to talk about what the future looks like for us.
Sure. Thanks, Jesse. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jules. I'm the GIS architect at Wheat Ridge. So Argis has been instrumental in helping us achieve some of our big GIS goals. Since I came on board almost 2 years ago, we've worked on a variety of projects, everything from database migration to GIS integration into our ERP systems. Thank you very much, SIPA, for allowing us to do ERP. And then going forward, we're going to be upgrading our entire enterprise system. And so Argis is going to help us with that to make sure that we're implementing best practices, make sure everything is moving the way it needs to, and then it'll be operational in the end. Two big considerations for me as a GIS person, it's my time and it's the expertise, right? So first of all, time. We're a very small department. There's 2 of us. So how do we best utilize our time? Is it customer service, or is it in the background, maintaining systems and making sure everything works right? There's just not enough hours in the day. And so a lot of times, I will rely on Argis to take on some of those big projects that would take up a lot of my time. That way I can focus on the customer service piece. And then second consideration is expertise. So in GIS, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. There are very few experts that know everything about GIS. And so it's really understanding my limitations and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And Argis really helps fill those gaps in those areas that maybe I need a little extra help in. And they're great about teaching me. I think, being able to partner with experts like Argis really helps elevate our abilities to promote GIS and help not only, my colleagues, but the citizens of our city. So that's about all I got.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules. Thanks, Jesse. And I love the point you brought, Jules, because that's a critical thing. Is I kind of alluded to it earlier, but GIS by itself, people get PhDs in the basic technologies of GIS. We're not talking about IT or security or comp sci coding. Just here. Yet then to roll out a full GIS system, you have people writing code, you have people setting up servers, you have security, you have all of these various areas of expertise. It can be very difficult to cover all those. So oftentimes how we partner is we simply fill in gaps of technology knowledge, just kind of partnering with you so that you can do your work, and something that you weren't quite is either difficult for your team to equip, or you just have made the determination not to equip on your team, we can fill the gaps of. So I know I'm going to keep on digging. I'm going to go pretty quick here. So, there are a lot of things your organization can do. We're going to give you 2 examples here really quick, of things that some other organizations have done recently that are pretty cool. One of them is for the city of Laramie lead service line. So one of the things that's coming up for a lot of people, I actually went to school in Flint, Michigan. So that might be part of what explains who I am. But lead and copper lines have become an issue, water quality, all of these things and the effects of this. There are tools and solutions, COTS out of the box solutions that you can roll out inside of Esri to help you do this. So it's called the lead and copper solution. Well, we rolled this out for Laramie, and they gave it to their public work, their utility team. And not only did they get this EPA guidelines and all this stuff set up, but then they're like, oh wait, I have the data, I can do things. And so they started expanding it. They put all of their data in. They're using this in the field. Yeah, nice. Somebody knows this. So it really empowered them it did it twofold. One, it solved the problem they had for the EPA, but two, and just as importantly, it empowered their field crews to truly use GIS in a way that made them a better team and made them more efficient and made them more effective. And now GIS and their field crews are working hand in hand, getting this done and making better data. So you want to know a hint about getting better quality data? Get your field crew who's actually standing on top of your data, helping you collect that data. And your data starts getting really good. Another one, and we actually alluded to this one earlier, but for the Architects Council of Governments, how Texas does their addressing is they have these cogs. We have a cog here, but I don't think they handle addressing. We do it slightly differently in Colorado, but down here, these cogs manage their addressing, and they have a lot of rural addressing, and it's very difficult to keep it up to date, trying to get those things correct, make sure you know what the addressing is, and getting this so that it can then be published out to 911 organizations and other organizations so they can use it to get the correct addresses. And as you say, reverse geocode, so you actually get an answer that matters. Well, we started with another COTS solution from Esri, which is called the addressing management tool. And then we customize that with both other COTS tools and some Python code to build a tool that allowed them to do this whole addressing solution. And in their own words, it was a third cheaper than what they were using before, which had died because of the technology got unmodern and it just couldn't work anymore. And it was twice as fast to enter. And this is just a tool that allowed them, by using the right pieces of tools, we got something more efficient and effective out to them that was faster. And then it was also based on the same platform as everything else they had. So it became a very cool tool for them and really helped solve some of their NENA 911 needs. You could move on. So in conclusion, think about your work. If you're looking at GIS, if you're thinking about GIS, if you don't have it yet but want it and you're thinking about it, or if you have a bunch of it, the same thing happens for everything. Plan the work the plan. What do I need to solve? What do I think? And we can help you answer this if you need it, if it helps. What can I solve in my budget? What would be the most effective for my organization so that I can make this a better place with GIS? And then let's do that. Let's put that plan into motion and make something happen. Lots of tools. We've talked about a whole bunch of things. It's a huge subject. GIS has a lot of different things, but understand if you have a strategy, these tools can come and become a benefit for you, not a daunting thing that you just have to maintain once a year because the nightmares occurred again. So hopefully this helps you. Hopefully it encourages you. That is me looking happier with a less beard. But we're here. We are part of SIPA. We're so super excited about that. We're already working with a few organizations. Maybe they're on this call or not, inside of SIPA, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing if we can help make some of your GIS dreams come true as well. And I left, oh my word, 7 minutes for questions. I am sorry, but hey, we answered a couple on the way, so that's my excuse. I'm taking it.
We did. So if anyone has a question they'd like to ask, please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get you unmuted. Otherwise, you're welcome to throw it in the Q&A or the chat. And Brady, real quick, I know one of the things that I really appreciated when chatting with you earlier, you mentioned if someone already has purchased, say, Esri, but they don't know all the tools that are included and incorporated in that, you can come in and do an assessment and help them figure out what they have so they can either streamline that or start taking advantage of some of them tools that they're not using, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're doing some type of there's like a small local cloud governments package that Esri puts out, or their EA enterprise agreement package. Almost all of these come with extra tools that you may or may not be using. And so we can help you kind of look at those and say, hey, this is what the purpose of it is. This is what it does. Does this help you? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. You're like, oh, we'll never use that. All right. Well, at least now you have something you'll never use. Maybe that's a negotiating point you could use for Esri later. I don't know. But oftentimes that opens things like, for example, if you do have an EA, even a small government EA or something like this, enterprise agreement, which Esri calls, it often comes with like mobile field licenses. So your field crews could be using it. And those are oftentimes very underutilized, right? And that could be a real empowering thing for you.
All right. Well, I am not seeing anything, and I have really appreciated the comments and questions that people have put in already. So thank you for all of that. If you have any that pop up, after this webinar that you want to ask, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd like to, schedule a discovery call if you want to learn more or get a quote for you if you're interested in that. Please keep an eye out. We do have some webinar Wednesdays that are scheduled coming up. The next one will be November 12th with Cornflower Labs. They are one of our newest suppliers, and they are whizzes at data gathering, analysis, and presentation. So that'll be a fun one. Please join us. And then on December 3rd, we're going to have Gartner Incorporated, who is one of our great consultants. So they're going to put together a presentation where more details on that to come soon. That'll be December 3rd. So save that date. You'll find links to register at any of these on our website, sipa.colorado.gov. Be sure to subscribe to our monthly newsletter to keep up with any news and upcoming events and other services that we can help you procure, and of course, useful accessibility and cybersecurity resources. If you want to return to this webinar to watch it again or share it with a colleague, we'll be getting it up on YouTube as soon as we get it processed, so look for that. And please, please, please do that last survey that we're going to send out to you. It's 3 short questions. We'd love to find out how we can keep making these better for you, so we appreciate your feedback. Thank you again for joining us today, and make it a fantastic day, everyone.